Welcome to Module 3. If you've come through Modules 1 and 2, you now have the complete three-engine wealth system framework and a clear picture of how to build a virtual investing organization to support it. The question that follows now is typically the most practical one of all. How do I actually get started? And that's what this module is about. It's the landscape of options that are available to you within each engine and how to think about which one might suit you. Think of it as a guided tour. The reality, of course, for most people coming into the three-engine wealth system is that you probably don't know yet what futures trading or options trading or even equity trading involves. You may have heard of the wheel strategy, or you may have heard of value investing, but not have a clear picture of how it actually works day to day. You may have a general sense that megatrends or cryptocurrency could be part of an accumulation engine portfolio, but no actual framework for thinking about which specific opportunities are worth pursuing. And that's totally fine. That's exactly what this module is designed to address. The goal of Module 3 is not to turn you into an expert in any of these approaches. That's what the mentors are for. And Module 2 gave you the tools to find good ones. The goal here is something more modest and more immediately useful. It's to give you enough of a picture of each approach that you can recognize which ones resonate with your situation, which ones feel like obvious mismatches, and which ones you want to explore further by finding a mentor who teaches them. By the time you finish this module, you should have a working hypothesis for each engine, a first informed sense of which direction feels most right for you. It doesn't need to be a final answer. It just needs to be specific enough to drive the mentor search, rather than leave you browsing YouTube with no clear sense of what you're actually looking for. Now here's how this module is structured. We're going to cover a lot of ground across 10 episodes. 3 episodes on the income engine options, 2 on the growth engine, and 1 on the accumulation engine. And then we'll have 3 episodes bringing it all together and getting started in practice. Each approach episode follows the same pattern: what the approach is, what it actually feels like to run it, who it tends to suit well, and what the realistic requirements are. We're not going to tell you which approach to choose because the right answer depends on your specific situation and your schedule and your personality and where you are in your financial journey. And only you can assess those things fully. But we'll give you enough information that you can make an informed choice. Now let's start by giving you the lay of the land. What are the main approaches available for each engine? This is just the overview. Each of the following episodes goes into much more depth on the ones that are most relevant to you. For the income engine, the primary options are futures trading, active stock trading, options income trading, forex, penny stocks. These are all active approaches. They require you to be engaged with the market on a regular basis, making trading decisions and managing positions. The specific instrument determines a lot about what engagement looks like: how often you trade, how much money you need to start, how much time you need to give it, and what kind of emotional demands the approach places on you. And we're going to cover all of these in upcoming episodes. For the growth engine, the main options are the wheel strategy, value investing, dividend investing, even real estate investing. These are systematic approaches to compounding capital. They're less active than the income engine in day-to-day terms, but they require real analytical skill and consistent discipline. The wheel strategy is the approach that the $1 Million Experiment uses. So we're going to give it particular attention in the 5th episode. The alternatives are going to be covered in the 6th episode. For the accumulation engine, the main categories of opportunity are major trend investing and high asymmetry categories like cryptocurrency. The accumulation engine is different from the other two in an important way. It's not a method that you learn from a single mentor in the same way. It's more of a thesis process. You develop a view on how the world is going to change over the next several years, and then you invest in assets that will benefit from that change. And the 7th episode covers what that looks like in practice. Now, before we go any further, it's worth saying something about how most people actually find their way into an approach, because the reality is different from how Module 2 described the process. In Module 2, we described a very structured approach. You build your gap map, you identify what you need, and then you go looking for mentors who address that specific gap. Now, that framework is useful once you know enough about the territory to have formed a gap map in the first place. But for many people just starting out, the reality is simpler and a bit more organic than that. You come across someone on YouTube, for example, whose content resonates with you. You start following along, and you gradually absorb the approach that they're teaching. And through that process, you develop a sense of whether it fits your situation or not. And there's nothing wrong with that path. In fact, it's how many experienced investors got started. The risk it carries is that you can invest a significant amount of time in following someone's content before realizing that the approach is not a good fit for where you are. And because the mismatch only becomes clear once you understand the approach well enough to see it, that risk can become a reality. Module 3 is designed to accelerate that process. Instead of discovering through weeks of content consumption that futures trading, for instance, requires a daily time commitment that you just can't sustain, you can find that out in the next 20 minutes. Instead of realizing 3 months in that the wheel strategy requires more starting capital than you currently have, for example, you can understand that now and decide whether to build toward it or explore something else first. The goal is not to prevent you from exploring approaches through YouTube and mentor content. That's exactly how the virtual investing organization works. The goal is to make that exploration faster, more informed, and less likely to result in wasted time following the wrong path for your specific situation. Think about it this way. If you had a knowledgeable friend who had spent years exploring all the main active investing and trading approaches, you'd probably sit down with them before diving in and ask them, what are the main options? What does each one actually involve? And which ones are worth exploring, given where you're starting? That conversation would save you a significant amount of time and help you walk into the mentor search with much better questions. And that's what this module is designed to be. Now, as you watch the approach episodes, there are a few things to pay attention to that'll help you form a useful working hypothesis rather than just accumulating information. And the first one is time. Not in the abstract sense, but in a very specific sense of what a typical week or a typical day actually looks like when you're running a particular approach. Futures trading, for example, means being present at your screen during a specific session window, paying close enough attention and making real-time decisions. Now, if your workday runs through that window and you cannot genuinely step away from other responsibilities, that's important to know before you get too excited about a future mentor's content. The growth engine approaches are generally less demanding in terms of daily time, but they require their own kind of commitment, regular research, periodic decision-making, and sustained attention to how your positions are developing over time. The accumulation engine is the most flexible in terms of when you engage with it. Thesis research doesn't need to happen on a market schedule, but it requires a different kind of sustained engagement, staying current with the trends and developments that affect your thesis positions, and then periodically reviewing whether those theses are still intact. As you go through each episode, the time picture will become clear. You don't need to have worked out your weekly schedule in advance. Just notice, as we describe what each approach looks like in practice, notice whether the picture feels sustainable for your life or if it feels like something that requires significant rearrangement to accommodate. The second thing to pay attention to is the capital requirement. This will also become clear from the approach descriptions. We'll tell you what the practical minimums are for each approach, not just the theoretical entry point, but the realistic starting amount for someone running the approach with a sound risk management. Some approaches are accessible with just a few $1,000s. Others require more to be run effectively. Now, knowing this does not need to be a blocking decision. It can be sequencing information. You might choose to start with an approach that fits your current capital level and then build toward other approaches as the system grows. The third thing, and this one is harder to quantify, is fit. As you hear about each approach, you'll notice that some of them produce a reaction of genuine interest and others produce something closer to dread. Pay attention to those reactions. They're telling you something real about which approaches align with how you naturally think and work, and which approaches would require a sustained effort that goes against the grain. An approach that genuinely engages you is one you'll keep developing skill in over months and years. An approach that feels like a chore from the very beginning, well, that's when you're more likely to abandon when it gets difficult. And every approach does get difficult at some point. That said, don't confuse unfamiliarity with dread. A lot of the options we're about to cover will be unfamiliar to most viewers. And unfamiliarity can feel uncomfortable in a way that resembles the feeling of a bad fit. But give each approach a fair hearing before deciding whether it is or isn't for you. The episodes are designed to make each approach feel concrete and understandable. And by the end of each one, the approach should feel something that you can evaluate, not just something that sounds technical. Now here's one more useful frame for going through this module. You're not making a permanent decision here. You're making a starting decision. The approach you choose first is the one that seems most accessible and most aligned with where you are right now. And that might change, probably will change, as your skill develops. and as your capital grows, or as your circumstances shift. Many investors who started with one income engine approach have moved to a different one as their experience developed. Many growth engine investors who started with one type of investing have moved to another type as their knowledge of options and other situations grew. The working hypothesis that you form at the end of this module is the right approach for right now, not the approach that you're committed to forever. There's also no requirement to have your approach for all three engines sorted out all at the same time. The natural sequencing of the three-engine system means that the income engine needs attention first, because it's the engine that needs to reach scale to eventually fund the others. Many investors spend their first year focused primarily on the income engine, and then to a lesser extent on the growth engine, and they only start engaging seriously with the accumulation engine once those first two have meaningful momentum. If you finish this module with a clear income engine hypothesis and a rougher sense of the growth and accumulation engines, that's perfectly good as a starting position. Now, if you have come through modules 1 and 2, it's worth saying explicitly how module 3 connects to what you already know. In module 1, you learned what each engine does and why the system is structured the way it is. You know that the income engine generates monthly cash flow, and the growth engine compounds capital, and the accumulation engine pursues asymmetric, long-horizon positions. What module 1 did not tell you is how to generate that cash flow, or which specific approach to use for the compounding, or what kind of thesis positions belong in the accumulation engine. That's what module 3 fills in. In module 2, you learned how to find and evaluate mentors through the virtual investing organization framework, the gap map, the credibility tests, the 30-day trial. What module 2 assumed is that you already knew roughly what approach you were looking to learn. For viewers who came to module 2 without that knowledge, well, the gap map exercise was probably quite abstract. Module 3 makes it concrete. By the end of this module, you'll not only be able to populate the gap map with real, specific entries, not an I need an income engine mentor loose idea, but more of a I need a mentor who teaches the wheel strategy, whose content covers stock selection in depth. That's the sort of thing that we're going to put together in module 3, that kind of clarity. Now, if you're coming to module 3 without having worked through modules 1 and 2, that's also fine. Module 3 is designed to stand on its own as a practical introduction to the approach options within the three-engine framework. The episodes are self-contained, and the approach descriptions don't require prior knowledge of the virtual investing organization framework. But if you find the approach options useful, I would encourage you to go back and watch modules 1 and 2. They'll give you the full context for why the three-engine structure exists and how to build the support system to run it well. The short version for new viewers is this. The three-engine wealth system uses an income engine to generate monthly cash flow through active trading, a growth engine to compound capital systematically over time, and an accumulation engine to take long-horizon asymmetric positions in high-potential opportunities. The three engines work together over a multi-year horizon to build toward a target of meaningful monthly income and a substantial capital base. Module 3 answers the practical question, what specific approaches are available for each engine, and how do you choose? Now let me give you a quick overview of what's coming in the next 9 episodes so you know what to expect. So episodes 2, 3, and 4 in this module cover the income engine. Episode 2 is about futures trading, the approach that the $1 Million Experiment uses, and one of the most capital-efficient ways to generate active trading income from a small starting account. Episode 3 covers active stock trading and options income trading. And episode 4 covers Forex, penny stocks, and a few other approaches that attract a lot of attention online. And a direct look at why the mentor landscape in those areas requires particularly careful evaluation. Episodes 5 and 6 cover the growth engine. Episode 5 is about the wheel strategy, what it involves, how it works, and what it actually feels like to run it through different market conditions. Episode 6 covers value investing, dividend investing, and real estate as an alternative to a growth engine approach. Episode 7 covers the accumulation engine, trends, cryptocurrency, and how to think about building a portfolio of thesis positions over time. Now, after the approach episodes, episode 8 brings your 3 working hypotheses together into a personal starting point. Episode 9 covers the practical setup, the platforms, the accounts, and the administrative foundation that you need before you can actually start. And episode 10 takes you through your first 30 days of actually running the system, what to prioritize, what to expect, and how to know if you're on track. Now, before the next episode, here's one practical suggestion. As you watch the approach content, have something to write with nearby. When an approach resonates, when the description makes you think, hey, that sounds like something I could actually do, write it down. When an approach produces a clear, that's not for me reaction, make a note of that as well. Those instinctive responses are useful data. They will not always be correct, but they are a starting point for building your working hypothesis. And it's much easier to refine a starting position than to start with a blank page at the end of the module. There's a lot of useful territory to cover in the episodes ahead. By the end of this module, the 3-engine wealth system should feel like something you can actually start, not just a framework you understand, but a specific plan that you can begin executing. That's the goal of everything that follows. Remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode, and we'll see you there.